From the New York Times, I'm Anna Martin. This is Modern Love. Heather Sellers wrote her Modern Love essay in 2013. It was about reconnecting with her estranged, abusive father, Fred, and she wrote it with a sense of closure, as a way to make peace with their complicated relationship. But in the 10 years since Heather published her essay, her feelings have changed. There's something interesting about a Modern Love essay. At some point, it becomes an artifact, a snapshot of a particular moment in the author's life. But what happens when time passes and that story doesn't feel true anymore? Heather Sellers, welcome to Modern Love.
Thank you for having me.
So you wrote your Modern Love essay back in 2013. Have you read it recently?
I haven't read it. I didn't even read it when it was published.
Why didn't you want to read it?
Thinking about my father and the just truly excruciating pain of that relationship is so destabilizing. The less, the better. It felt really important to me to document what had happened between us at the end of his life, and I sent it away and didn't really want to think about it again.
But what you've agreed to do with me today is to read your essay. I know it will not be easy for you, but I'd love to have a conversation about what you wrote then and how you feel about it now, if that feels okay.
It's scary, but I'm curious. I'm curious what's there. It feels like opening a time capsule altogether, right?
Yeah, it really does. If it works for you, I want to start with the beginning of your essay, which has this really striking, almost funny image of you trying to connect with your dad on a video call. And the first thing you see when you log on is your dad's caregiver. Can you start reading there?
Yes. My computer screen filled with bosom. The bosom belonged to Dawn, the activities director at the care center in Florida where my father was living. She leaned over her laptop and shouted, "Can you hear us?" I leapt out of my chair, closed my office door. I was shaking. When Dawn stepped aside, I would see the father I hadn't seen in years and never seen sober.
Tell me a little bit more what it was like at home for you with your dad. You lived with him when you were a teenager from age 13 to age 17. What did your dad do that wasn't like other dads or other parents?
As I look back on it now, the layers of neglect and abuse were so pervasive. So my dad drinks around the clock. He'll disappear for days. I am not always eating. I'm not always able to get to school. He doesn't even know what grade I'm in, much less like where the bus picks you up or drops you off. So there's a lot of Heather walking around Orlando by herself, not safe. Men come in and out of the house. Women come in and out of the house. The doors are never locked. He's sexually bizarre. There's porn videos running on VCRs in the dining room and in his bedroom 24/7, porn magazines. There's so many addictions and issues. And then separately, it's so chaotic and complex, but he is also always wearing women's clothes, pantyhose, a bra, painted nails.
Did the two of you talk about that?
Never. It was unspoken.
Did you ever try to bring it up?
Never.
Because you were scared?
Yes.
What were you scared of?
It felt very scary to bring up anything to my father. He's a very dominating person and he's violent. So like every child of an alcoholic, the day has a shape to it. So there's no predictability. But you're so attuned to the way the tires sound in the driveway when the car pulls in.
Wow.
You know exactly how violent it's going to be when he walks in the door. You know by how the door closes. So you're just, we call it hypervigilance now. Like you're so calibrated. So there's like a little window where you could put in your ask, but that was very low on my list of what things I needed from my dad.
How did that affect you as a kid? Would other people talk about him?
Oh, it was horrifying. I was so ashamed of him. I was ashamed of my shame, and I wanted to protect him. I saw the judgy looks. This is a conservative place to live.
And this is in what state were you living in?
We're in Florida. And growing up with him, because he wasn't able to function, I kind of ran the house, right? Like I paid the bills, I did the grocery shopping, I drove him around.
You did that starting at age what?
Like 13, 14.
Wow, okay.
And there were parts that I really loved. I felt like I lived in a carnival and it was kind of tricky, but how cool was I that I had all this responsibility, that I ran the house? That's the story I told. He was super funny and creative. He was a great talker. He would talk to anyone, but he was not discriminating in any sense of the word in any part of his life. And he also... he was kind of punk rock. Like he's saying no to all convention. As a teenager, I'm kind of liking this a lot, that we are against sort of the moral majority or whatever. I pretended that this was all exciting, fun, rebellious, and I grew up so strong. When his transgressions crossed a line, I said no, absolutely not.
You write in your essay, at age 30, you said no completely. You cut your father off. Is that what happened?
Yes. I didn't go and visit him, and I did not allow him to come and visit me.
Were you still in touch during those years?
Very rarely. He sent me a couple letters during that period. Why haven't you called me? I can never reach you. And he signs his letters, his greatness. His greatness.
Did he refer to himself like that growing up? Was that he did?
He did. He had a huge portrait of himself in our living room.
Wow.
Instead of pictures of his kids, he called his stool that he sat on at the counter his throne. So I feel like he's so many things. I think we can just call it chaos.
How long did this period of minimal contact last between the two of you?
So that's my 30s. And then he starts getting really sick and he needs care and he's not able to care for himself. And the relatives are calling me in. And I refuse to do it until the very, very end when I put him in this home.
Why did you get back in touch with him after all of these years, after all of that pain? What did you want?
I knew he was moving towards the end of his life. And I was very motivated to get the death I wanted, since I had not gotten the life with him I wanted. I was not going to be in my mid-40s or 50s regretting anything. I was going to script this how I needed it for me. And I wanted to know, I wanted to ask him these questions. Who were you? Why were you like this? I wanted to ask every single question. And I wanted the last words he heard from me to be, I love you. And I wanted to feel his love for me. I wanted a storybook ending, like in a movie.
Which is why you're on this video call. You wanted to reconnect with your father after all these years of silence. Can you keep reading from your essay about that first call?
Yes. Now, here he was, Fred Sellers, at 80 years old. I hadn't seen him in so many years. His bright eyes moved around the screen, intensely curious. He still had his thick white hair and gigantic eyebrows. His stroke-frozen claw hand was clutched over his heart. He worked his good hand to the keyboard. I was afraid he was going to break our connection. I spoke first. Daddy, I said. I sounded so small. My throat hurt. I did not want to cry. I was at work wearing mascara and a white blouse. I had to teach class in less than an hour. I said, "You look so good." He peered hard at the screen. "Well, hell," he said. "Where you been, girl child?" His stroke-affected speech was heavy on vowels and light on consonants, but every word was as clear to me as always. He looked better than ever. Was this the first time I'd seen him sober? "Can you see me, Daddy?" I said. "No," he shouted, banging his good hand on the keyboard. I found the green button on my screen just under his chin that said video. It was on. Then I remembered. Since his stroke, when he said no, he meant yes, and yes meant no. He did see me. I pressed tissues to my face. "Isn't this great?" I said. "No," he shouted. "No, no." I smiled. So I cry again now, seeing him again. In spite of all the damage, I am in this moment, and even now as we're talking, I am so happy to see him again.
Mm-hmm. What about seeing him made you feel so overwhelmingly happy?
I know part of what allowed the love to pour forward, and does now too, is the safety of being 1,000 miles away. He's contained in a box for the first time, in a screen on my desk. Nothing bad can happen. He's supervised by Dawn, who was amazing. She and I became really good friends through all of this. His caregiver, and she loved him too.
So let's go back to your essay. After that first call, you and your father develop a kind of routine. Can you keep reading for me?
With Dawn's help, my father and I started talking every Friday afternoon. I said, "Dawn says you're doing pretty good." "No," he said, his whole body nodding yes. "No." I said, "It's so good to see you." "Oh gosh," he said. "Oh gosh, honey, look at you." This last would sound to the untrained ear as, "Oh, oh." He beamed. I'd never seen my father really happy before. I'd never seen his love for me shine through. But here it was. One day, I was pleased he was wearing a green striped shirt I'd mailed. I told him how nice he looked. He looked down at himself and back up at me, shaking his head as if to say, "Life's a mystery." We'd been estranged forever, yet now we were having the best relationship we'd ever had. "I love you," I shouted at the end of each conversation. He said every time as he zipped out of the screen. "I love you too."
This sounds like such a positive and heartwarming and wholesome image that you're describing.
When I read it now, I'm laughing because I see so much effort on the part of younger me to make it look like we'd had closure and everything was okay. It is so radically not the case.
We'll be right back. Heather, when you wrote this essay 10 years ago, you were still writing from this perspective of healing and forgiveness. And you talk about what happens when your dad gets really sick. Let's go to that part of your essay.
Finally, Dawn broke the news to me. My dad had lung cancer. I flew to Orlando and spent 3 days with him. We held hands and laughed a lot. That's so not true.
Really?
It's not true.
Wait, that didn't happen? You weren't laughing?
Not the way that it's making it sound. I mean, it sounds like something I got from a Hallmark movie. I mean, we held hands, yes.
Yeah.
There was laughing.
Sure.
But not like this.
So I mean, you're laughing right now as you read this. Why did you write the scene in this way? What were you trying to communicate?
I did what I've always done in order to survive. I took the good parts and I made them as big as possible while leaving out all of the other parts.
Right.
It's not a lie, but it's also not what it was. Like, that's not It's not the whole story.
Right. If you were to rewrite that section now, how would you write it?
I flew to Orlando and spent 3 days with him. I had an excruciating migraine. I talked to my therapist every single one of those days and wept for hours.
That is very different from the words that we have on the page. You were with him, but you weren't really with him.
Because he couldn't be with himself or with anyone else. This implies a psychological intimacy that never existed and couldn't exist.
But you wanted it to exist, which is why you wrote it this way.
I wanted it to exist. I still want it to exist.
Let's keep going with reading this section.
I showed him old photos. I read him a book I'd salvaged from my childhood. That evening, after dinner, he pointed to his chest. I asked, "Does it hurt?" He nodded and asked me, "Is it bad?" "It's not good," I said. "Damn it," he said. I held his hand while he slept. They said 6 months, maybe 3 years. 2 weeks later, he was dead. As he passed, a nurse, an angel in ICU, held the phone to his ear. She said, "When he hears your voice, he smiles." In the end, we had just barely a year, but I got what I wanted, to be a normal daughter. And after he died, I got to have some profoundly normal grief. The last words he heard me say were, "I love you." And his last to me, said in his way, were, "I love you too." What's not here, because I was too ashamed to share it, because it would take away from what I was thinking was my good daughter narrative, was I had won my college's largest teaching award, and the ceremony was the same day. And I had a choice to accept the award or to go to his deathbed. And I chose to accept the award.
Wow.
I was not ready to tell that part 10 years ago.
You know, you said before that you wanted the last thing, you wanted to write his death, right? You kind of wanted to control the narrative of the end of his life, and you wanted the last thing that you said to him to be, "I love you." And you do that. The last thing you say to him before he dies is, "I love you." Was that satisfying to you?
Absolutely. I'm really, really happy that we had that year of calls. I'm really happy I went down to see him. It was the beginning of the end of the fantasy relationship. And after he died, I got a job offer, a really great job, tenure, directing MFA program. The only catch was it's an hour from where I grew up in Florida.
Wow.
So I took the job, and when I came back here, I kept seeing my father, and it wasn't like a hallucination. I kept running into him, and he was dead, but it was like he wasn't dead. So any guy in a scooter crossing the street, it would be him, and I'd be like, "There, I have to help him. There he is. I have to help him." And I had a massive amount of memories come back, just walking on the grass, the way the light would hit the palm fronds in my yard it was like I was reliving the life. And so that caused me to see everything completely differently and to begin to come to terms with reality.
What did it change for you?
I was able to acknowledge the damage. I was able to say that was an extraordinary amount of abuse and neglect. It was not okay.
You know, you end this essay that you wrote 10 years ago by talking about forgiveness. Let's go to the end of your essay.
Forgiveness is a heavy-duty word. I don't know that I forgave my father. I'm not even sure what that means. What happened between us at the end of his life feels more simple and complex than forgiveness. Those conversations don't cancel out the years of trauma and neglect. but neither does the bad cancel out those final moments of grace. Both are true. I held both in my heart, and I am grateful. And the year before he died, I got to love my father some.
Do you stand by that now? Do you still feel unsure if you've forgiven him?
Yes, I'm so happy to see that. If you'd asked me, what did you say at the end of your essay? Did you forgive him? I would have said, oh, I'm sure that she forgave him. I'm really happy that that strong Heather was there.
Yeah.
I don't really love that word. Like, I don't know what that word means.
Forgiveness?
Like, it's something yeah.
That's so interesting. Why?
Well, it feels like something you do to somebody else. Like, I call it the other F word. Like, I'm not really comfortable with that, like, power thing.
The other F word. I don't know what that means. What do you mean by that?
Like, that you're going to do something to somebody. It's not a relationship.
As in, like, it's kind of one-sided. I forgive you. It's like
Yeah. It doesn't feel intimate. It doesn't feel undefended or vulnerable. It feels very self-protective. I need to protect myself from my father, but forgiveness is not, it's not going to do anything that I need it to. It's not going to bring me closer to him, and it's not going to keep me safe from him. Instead, we're in this space together. If I can understand my pain with some greater degree of insight and accuracy, and that leads me to understanding his, that's interesting to me.
When you tell someone about your father now, how do you like to describe him?
I definitely stopped telling the story of the kind of fun, wacky, it was like having a pet llama. I would say things like that, with the smiling defense and the joking, and really focused on all the things I got from it. I'm much more sober about what I lost. I don't get to have access to the good daughter narrative. I don't get the closure that I wanted and this lovely moment. I don't get that. It occurs to me, like, reading the essay now with you. You know, I was 17 when I left his house, and then I was about in my mid-30s when this is all happening. And it's like, I wasn't out of his house that long, right? I still had to raise myself. So then another 17. So if we look at it as kind of like 3 sections. Another 17 years, like, to raise myself as an adult and to be my own good parents to myself. Now I can see, okay, that was a super scary, dangerous man that you lived with, and you're safe now. It's not the father story that I sent to Modern Love.
You know, you're talking about that younger Heather, the one who wrote this essay 10 years ago, as a different person. Are you not that Heather now?
Not that Heather now. When I'm reading the essay now with you, that just needing to be seen, like desperately needing to be seen as someone who's connected to her father, or I'm a bad person, I think that's part of the legacy of the abuse. It's like, you feel just so ashamed of being you, and so much wanting to please him and get it right with him. And now that I'm older, it's receded. And a stronger, more adult self says, the best thing I want to do in my life is to connect to my fellow humans with reverence and kindness and curiosity and compassion. That's what I want to lead with. I think she always did that, and it made her very vulnerable, but I never lost my vulnerability.
You want to come to people with all of those things, but no forgiveness. No forgiveness for Heather.
No forgiveness. Terrible idea. What is it? What even is it? What are you doing?
Heather, thank you so much for coming back to your essay after 10 years with me. Thank you so much for reading it.
It was fascinating. Thank you so much for going on this with me.
We love that you listen to the show, and we want to hear from you. Email us with your observations, your questions, your comments. We read every single email and listen to every single voice memo you send us. You can reach us at modernlovepodcast@nytimes.com. If you have a story that you want to share with us, we'd love to hear it. We're always looking for good stories and new perspectives for the Modern Love column, no matter where you come from or who you are. To find out how to submit your own story, go to nytimes.com/modernlovesubmission. Modern Love is produced by Julia Botero, Christina Josa, Hans Butow, and Crystal Duhame. It's edited by our executive producer, Jen Poyant, with help from Annabelle Bacon. This episode was mixed by Daniel Ramirez. Our show was recorded by Maddie Masiello. The Modern Love theme music is by Dan Powell. Original music by Dan Powell, Marian Lozano, Pat McCusker, Rowan Nemisto, and Sophia Landman. Digital production by Mahima Chablani and Nell Galogli. Special thanks to Paula Schumann. The Modern Love column is edited by Daniel Jones. Mia Lee is the editor of Modern Love Projects. I'm Anna Martin. Thanks for listening.